afternoon. I'm Victoria Marshall with the latest news from the Washington Watch News Desk. The House of Representatives task force investigating the assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump released its interim findings today. The report notes that the deadly shooting, which took place at a Trump rally in Pennsylvania on July 13th, was a preventable incident stemming from lack of planning and communication between law enforcement. According to the task force, U.S. Secret Service personnel at the event did not give clear guidance to state and local authorities about how to manage security outside of their hard perimeter, nor was there a central meeting between Secret Service and the law enforcement agencies supporting them the morning of the rally. The task force found that gunman Thomas Crooks had been under scrutiny by local law enforcement for roughly 40 minutes before information about a suspicious person reached the Secret Service command post. The full House task force report is expected to be released on December 13th. And with just 2 weeks until the election, national polls show Donald Trump leading Kamala Harris. Trump has also pushed past Harris in Georgia, Wisconsin, and Michigan, swing states Joe Biden won in 2020. A new poll by Trafalgar Group has Trump leading Harris by 46 to 43% in the key battleground state of Pennsylvania. In contrast, Democratic Senate candidate for Pennsylvania, Bob Casey, is nearly tied with Republican Dave McCormick. Over the weekend, Trump made headlines by working at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania to claim that he has worked for 15 minutes more than his opponent, Kamala Harris. Harris has repeatedly claimed she worked at McDonald's as a college student.
I love McDonald's. I love jobs. I like to see good jobs. And I think it's inappropriate when somebody puts down all over the place that she worked at McDonald's. It was a big part of her resume that she worked at McDonald's, how tough a job it was. She specifically worked at the French fry, where they make the French fries, and she talked about the heat. It was so tough. She never worked at McDonald's. McDonald's just confirmed that again, by the way. She never worked at McDonald's. It's cute. This is fun. I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again.
Thank you.
Look at that. Look at that. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Nice.
Meanwhile, as Trump was working the fry counter, Vice President Kamala Harris was campaigning in Atlanta with pop star Usher.
I think, and I do believe Donald Trump is an unserious man. And the consequences of him ever being again in the White House are brutally serious.
And in other domestic news, the U.S. is investigating a leak of highly classified U.S. intelligence about Israel's plans for retaliation against Iran. The documents, marked October 15th and 16th, went viral on Friday after being posted on Telegram by an account called Middle East Spectator. The documents describe the preparations Israel is making for a strike against Iran in response to Iran's missile barrage against Israel on October 1st. Here's what House Speaker Mike Johnson had to say about it yesterday.
The leak is very concerning. There's some serious allegations being made there, investigation underway, and I'll get a briefing on that in a couple of hours. There's a classified level briefing and then other, but we're following it closely.
And finally, in international news, a British Army veteran has been convicted for silently praying outside an abortion clinic in the UK. Adam Smith Connor was found guilty of violating a buffer zone around an English abortion clinic in 2022. The court ruled that despite his silent prayer, Smith Connor's posture of prayer was enough to show disapproval with abortion.
I never imagined that the nation I love and has been so good to me in the past could turn on me for doing nothing more than offer up a prayer for my deceased son.
Smith Connor was charged under the UK's Public Spaces Protection Order, a broad censorship order that localities can use to curb supposedly antisocial behavior. And those are today's headlines. I'm Victoria Marshall. Up next is Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. We'll see you tomorrow with more news.
From the heart of our nation's capital in Washington, D.C., bringing compelling interviews, insightful analysis, taking you beyond the headlines and sound bites into conversations with our nation's leaders and newsmakers, all from a biblical worldview. Washington Watch with Tony Perkins starts now.
The leak is very concerning. There's some serious allegations being made there. Investigation underway, and I'll get a briefing on that in a couple of hours. There's a classified level briefing and then other, but we're following it closely.
That was House Speaker Mike Johnson yesterday on CNN's State of the Union, commenting on top secret documents from the U.S. being leaked regarding Israel's preparation to strike Iran for their October 1st attack on the Jewish state. Welcome to this Monday edition of Washington Watch. Thanks so much for tuning in. Pennsylvania Congressman Scott Perry, a member of the House Intelligence Committee, will join us with the latest on this leak that further undermines an already faltering relationship between the Biden-Harris administration and Israel. And over the weekend, Israeli forces targeted about a dozen branches of a financial institution in Lebanon that is the quasi-banking system for Hezbollah. It appears Israel is stepping up its efforts to eliminate the threats from both Hamas and Hezbollah prior to the November 5th election. It appears Iran may also be on that list. We'll talk about it. Also, we'll hear from House Speaker Mike Johnson on Israel's elimination of Hamas leader and October 7th mastermind Yahya Sinwar. Also, Vice President Kamala Harris was campaigning in Georgia yesterday at the New Birth Baptist Church.
And my earliest memories of those teachings are about a loving God. A loving God. A God who asks us to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves.
Yes, Jesus loves the little children. Well, I have to ask this question. Has the vice president made unrestricted abortion until birth her top policy priority? Where does speaking for the unborn fit in? The answer is it doesn't. But we do, and we will. We'll speak up for them. We'll continue our look at the 10 states that have abortion on the ballot. Today, we'll look at Arizona with Kathy Herod, president of the Center for Arizona Policy. Also, over the weekend, there was an attempted drone attack on the private residence of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And he was asked if that attempted attack would deter Israel's actions to eliminate the threat of Hezbollah. Here's what he said.
Well, 2 days ago, we took out Yahya Sinwar, the terrorist mastermind whose goons beheaded our men, raped our women, burnt babies alive. We took him out, and we're continuing our battle with Iran's other terrorist proxies. We're going to win this war.
So will something deter you?
No.
We'll talk more about that with Carolyn Gleck of JNS News. She'll be joining us live from Israel a little later here on Washington Watch. Election is right around the corner, 2 weeks away, and we have early voting underway in many states. We have a toolkit available for you to help you cast an informed ballot. Look, I've said this before. I will continue to say it. As Americans, we have a right to vote. As Christians, we have a responsibility to vote. To vote for those who are most closely aligned with biblical truth. I know it's not going to be a perfect choice, but we need to vote for those who will most closely align with biblical truth. To help you make that decision and cast an informed ballot, we have a toolkit available for you. Simply text the word toolkit. It's one word, toolkit, to 67742. That's toolkit to 67742. An investigation is underway following the leak of highly classified U.S. intelligence on Israel's plan to attack Iran. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby told reporters on a call this morning that President Biden and the administration are, quote, deeply concerned about the leak, and they have no reason to believe additional documents will be leaked. Now, this comes only after about a week ago when another letter, a letter from the U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and the Secretary of State Antony Blinken, letter was leaked to their Israeli counterparts. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Scott Perry. He serves on 4 House committees, including the Intelligence Committee and the Foreign Affairs Committee. He represents the 10th Congressional District of Pennsylvania. He is also a combat veteran who retired at the rank of Brigadier General in March of 2019. Congressman Perry, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Well, it's great to be with you, Tony. And there's a lot of things that are interesting about this leak. I got to tell you, as soon as I heard there was a leak, I hate to say it, but in my heart and in my gut, I was like, somebody on the inside of the United States government did this. Now, you should quantify that or qualify that if you're going to think that and say that. But we have an administration, and quite honestly, we have one of the major parties in America, one of two major parties, the Democrat Party, that is rife with anti-Semitism. We have an administration that has been working against Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli government. They've been working to overthrow his leadership there and have been playing on both sides of this war. So I was not surprised, quite honestly, when it was validated. Now, we're waiting to get a classified briefing on this. The agencies that have headlined this have, rightly so, not published the information because there is classified information within it. But what is also curious is that while President Biden has commented on this leak regarding his alleged concerns, the person that would be president, that wants to be president for the next 4 years, has been eerily silent on this. And understand the context of this is while she's trying to win Michigan and Wisconsin, who are generally supporters of not the states, but there are populations within those states that are supporters of the Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and Houthi cause. And so, unfortunately, how does the greatest ally that America has ever had, the only real ally that we have in the region, which is Israel, how do they trust the United States of America when these kind of things occur?
Right. Now, this was intel gathered by the United States on Israel. This didn't come from Israel. We're kind of snooping on Israel and reporting to others what Israel is doing. How many individuals would have access? Any idea how many would have access, and whether or not political appointees would have access to this information?
I would think that political appointees would have access, likely contractors. That's people that DOD hires to do some of the intelligence analysis, those kind of folks. And, look, we've got an administration that is pretty loose with security clearance obligations and is loose regarding the fealty, the love of America and America's interests. And unfortunately, like I said, I just wasn't surprised. I wish I could say I was surprised, but I have not been surprised. And I think that there are plenty of individuals within this administration that seek the downfall of Netanyahu and don't hold Israel as a dear ally of the United States of America, and wish to see Israel taken down to size and agree with the cause of Hamas and Hezbollah.
Congressman Perry, as I mentioned, you're a combat veteran. You've operated in the field. This is a major breach when we're putting out classified information about military operations of an ally. I would think that Israel, given also the leak that took place last week on a letter and the threats that we've been putting out there, and there was other information that was leaked about there in advance of their movement into Lebanon against Hezbollah a couple of weeks ago. I would be shocked if Israel would trust the United States and share information with them in the future.
Well, you're absolutely right, Tony. I mean, we all watch each other. We all look to see best practices and tactics, techniques, and procedures. That's what governments and militaries around the world do. Israel does it to the United States. We do it to allies as well as foes. Everybody's understanding of that. Here's what we don't understand. Here's what Israel won't be able to countenance: the revealing of that information to their adversary. Because as you know, Tony, as anyone who's watching this can imagine, this equates to lost lives on the ground. As soon as one of the primary elements of success in military operations is the element of surprise.
Right.
And once the enemy has that, your folks are in great peril. And
Right.
so this is the United States. This is essentially a direct and complete betrayal of Israel's greatest ally. And so Israel is going to have to proceed with caution now with anything that they tell the Biden administration. And why shouldn't they? Their service members' lives are on the line.
over the weekend, Israeli forces struck Al-Qard al-Hassan, the quasi-banking arm of Hezbollah. Is this more of the fracturing of Hezbollah's control and shaking the people's confidence in Hezbollah?
Well, this is Israel eradicating their number one enemy. Israel has a house, and in that house, there's a room with a terrorist living in it, and that terrorist is Hezbollah. It also is in the form of Islamic Jihad and Hamas. That's what that is, and Israel is very serious about extinguishing this threat so that they can live peacefully. Israel has reached out its hand over and over and over again to be rejected by the terrorist organizations that are proxies of Iran. And I think Israel has simply said, we've had enough. We are done trying to appeal to these people's interests and their good charity. And we must defeat this enemy that kills innocent men, women, children, elderly people. We simply must defeat them. And even if the rest of the world is watching and doesn't agree, the rest of the world doesn't have to live under the threat of conventional warfare and soon likely nuclear warfare.
Right. I mentioned the leaked letter last week. The Biden administration threatened an arms sanction on Israel if more humanitarian aid did not flow into Gaza. That was the leaked letter that was to the counterparts of Anthony Blinken and Lloyd Austin. Now, this despite the fact that Hamas has been repeatedly accused of stealing supplies from UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees. Ironically, food rations were found inside the bunker of now deceased Hamas leader Sinwar. I mean, Israel has long said that Hamas is the problem when it comes to the aid issue. Why is this being ignored by the Biden administration?
Because they're on both sides of this war. They wish to appeal. First of all, they're not really in support of the Jewish state. They're certainly not in support of Prime Minister Netanyahu. And this has become political for them. Like I said, one of the major parties in the United States has this corrosive but large-scale and sweeping anti-Semitic component to it, and they want their votes. So they're pandering for their votes. And again, instead of going after the terrorists and demand that they lay down their arms, they're going after Israel, who was attacked in an unprovoked fashion, as always, and demanding that they lay down and that they give more and more and more. And no one should be surprised that the aid has been found in the leaders of Hamas or Hezbollah's homes or bunkers or headquarters. Everybody in the world knows this, and that's why we tried to defund the United Nations Relief and Workers Agency. But literally, the majority of the Democrat Party in the House of Representatives voted against defunding that. So we have American tax dollars funding the enemy of Israel, the terrorist state of Iran through their proxies, Hamas. And you have this Biden administration playing on both sides of the war for political purposes. It is dangerous to civilization. It certainly puts lives in perils, and now of American service members serving alongside missile batteries in Israel.
It's an outright shame.
Yeah.
Congressman Scott Perry, thank you so much for taking time to join us on this Monday. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Tony. God bless you.
Folks, and I just want to encourage you, we need to pray for our leaders that they would do the right thing. It is a very dangerous place to be operating in a way that is against Israel. I'm just saying, history records that. Don't go away. We're going to hear from House Speaker Mike Johnson next here on Washington Watch.
We humbly, Father, bow before you in these moments that we have together, that this wouldn't just be any other conference, but that literally, Lord, you would reset our hearts to be in alignment with your word, that you would reset the city of Washington, D.C. to be in realignment with your word.
There's no politician, including Trump, that can affect the soul of this nation. You're the only one. The answer's not in the State House, and it's not going to be in the White House. It's got to be in your own house. It's got to be in the Church of God. It's got to be in his house.
Our principles never bend to politicians.
Yes.
Our principles never bend to politicians. By God's grace, it will be the other way around. Politicians will bend to our biblically based child protective principles.
No matter what comes in November, no matter if it doesn't go the way you want or I want or the things we prayed for. Our focus and priorities do not change as Christians. We fight against evil, we stand for truth, we tell people the good news of Jesus Christ, we tell them the truth.
So let's not be discouraged. Don't lose heart. Don't lose the faith. Stand now strong, because the Lord has given us the great privilege of living in a time when our choices matter, when our lives matter, when our courage matters. So let's stand together and save this great country. God bless the United States of America.
There are 40 million self-described evangelical Christians who do not vote in a presidential election. If half of those people who sit in church on their blessed assurance would pray, stand, and vote, we would change every election in this country from the school board all the way to the White House.
All it takes, friends, is one generation for us to lose what is valuable, important, and sacred. Every generation has the opportunity to preserve what is right, what is godly, what is good about the United States of America, or to shirk our responsibilities and to watch what happens in just one generation in our country.
This may not be an easy task, but we are living in a moment of challenge, but also of great opportunity. And we know, always, that we are not alone, that His Spirit empowers us and protects us, and that He can do the unimaginable. Dobbs, after all, was never supposed to happen.
Father, we thank you. You have entrusted us with this moment in history, and I pray that we would be found faithful, and that as a result of our faithfulness to you, that thousands, millions would come into the kingdom as they would experience the forgiveness of sin and the new life that is found only in Jesus Christ. Amen.
Welcome back to this Monday edition of Washington Watch. Now, for those of you who may not be aware, I have a weekend program with House Speaker Mike Johnson. It's called This Week on the Hill. It airs on the Salem Radio Network, Salem News Channel, Salem Podcast Network, and townhall.com. If you haven't tuned in to that yet, I encourage you to visit thisweekonthehill.com. Now, Speaker Johnson joined me this past weekend to discuss. In fact, he was literally on his way from one city to the next for his American Revival tour through the swing states. And he joined me to talk about Israel's elimination of the mastermind behind the October 7th massacre, Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, in Gaza. In case you didn't hear it, here it is. You put out a statement yesterday that let this be a reminder to Hamas and all those who were involved in the October 7th attacks that you may try to terrorize and intimidate, but those who live under the banner of freedom will never surrender. This was a game changer, was it not?
It was a game changer. I just got off the phone right before I came live with you. Apologize for the lighting here. We'll come out of the tunnel in New York City here in a moment. I was on the phone with Speaker Ohana, who is my counterpart in the Knesset. That's the equivalent of the Congress in Israel. And he was giving me his firsthand account of where we are and how things stand. And I was glad to hear his report. They're very encouraged in Israel. Of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu has led this war and made some very decisive actions. I think he's made history in the way that they've been so effective and how they've taken out the leaders of these terrorist regimes. And make no mistake about it, this leader of Hezbollah, just like the leader of Hamas, was one of the most evil men on the planet. I mean, this one was the mastermind of the October 7th more than a year ago now, and has been the leader of all sorts of evil plots and a great enemy of America. So this was a service to all mankind, and we have to stand unequivocally with Israel right now as they continue to prosecute this war and try to bring an end to the conflict. We're entering now a new moment of security and freedom in Israel, and they've got to finish the job.
So, Mr. Speaker, what message does this send to Iran? How do they interpret this?
Well, they need to interpret this very clearly. I've tried to speak with clarity and conviction. I've encouraged the White House and our leaders in President Biden's cabinet to do the same. That we have to send the message to Iran that their actions will not be tolerated. That America will stand with Israel, and we will take care of these evil plots. I sent out a message this week, Tony, as you saw, to the leaders of Iran. I put it out on social media. They have an assassination plot against President Trump, our nominee for president, to be the 47th president of the United States. And I said unequivocally, make no mistake about it, in the eyes of the Congress, if you attempt an assassination on our nominee for president, that will be equivalent as an act of war. And as you know, under our constitutional system, it is Congress that declares war. So I want them to know, even if Biden is only communicating through staff, the Speaker of the House is very resolute on this. And I think the entire government of our country needs to take that kind of stand right now. It's very, very important for the whole world.
Mr. Speaker, let me ask you about that, because you just had a conversation with the Speaker of the Knesset in Israel. And I know they have to work with the Biden-Harris administration. I mean, they are the executive branch. But I think it's evident that without a solid support within Congress, Israel would be in a real jam right now.
Well, of course. I mean, you know, I've traveled to Israel many times in my career, and you have as well, Tony. And when we meet with the prime minister there, the leaders of the IDF, the military, all their government officials, they all say, from Netanyahu on down, that if America was not standing strongly with Israel, they would cease to exist. I mean, we are a critical component to their success and their survival as a nation. And when America speaks with conviction on this, we speak with moral clarity, which we need to do right now more than ever, in favor of Israel and against anti-Semitism and against Iran and these terrorist regimes and all of their proxies. It has huge importance around the globe, and we have to do that right now. And I'm calling on President Biden and everyone in his cabinet to do that. This is not a moment to equivocate, and it is not a moment to second guess Israel or to try to appease Iran, which they've done too many times.
We're talking with House Speaker Mike Johnson. He is joining us from the road as he's crisscrossing the country. I'm going to go back to your conversation with the House Speaker, the Knesset Speaker there in Israel. Is there a sense that this now opens the door to gaining the freedom of the hostages? Because Sinwar was really the one that had the power to veto the negotiations that were going on.
Yes, he's very encouraged. In fact, that's how the conversation began. He's my counterpart there, and we know each other very well. And he was encouraged because that has been, of course, their top priority all along is to defeat the evil and get the hostages released. And he seems very encouraged this morning. This may open a new chapter and a new opportunity to get that done finally, now more than a year past the October 7th atrocities. And we certainly need to pray, Tony, that they can. I mean, this is a biblical admonition, of course. You pray for the peace of Jerusalem and Israel, and certainly those families that have had to endure so much, for the hostages that are still yet being kept. So hopefully, prayerfully, that can be done now.
Mr. Speaker, we just have about a minute left in this segment. And I said you've been crisscrossing the country. I'm actually seeing a few more gray hairs there. Is that reflective of the schedule?
Yes, and I pray that it's all going to pay off. As of this morning, we will have done campaign events in 231 cities across 40 states. I'm leaving New York City in a moment. Nebraska, and then Iowa today. We'll be all around the country all the way through November 5. In this month alone, in October, I'll do more than 65 cities in 24 states. We're going to leave it all on the field, Tony, but it's going to pay off.
That was my conversation with House Speaker Mike Johnson during our weekend program, This Week on the Hill. And right now, you're tuned into Washington Watch. But I encourage you, visit This Week on the Hill to find out more about our weekend program. With the election coming up, let me encourage you to download our voter toolkit. It's free. All you need to do is text the word toolkit to 67742. That's toolkit, one word, to 67742. The resources include voter guides, an election prayer guide, party platform comparison, and much more. And you can share it with friends as well. All right? Toolkit. That's one word. To 67742. That's toolkit to 67742. It is so important that as Christians, as Americans, we have a right to vote. As Christians, we have a responsibility to vote. Cast an informed ballot, and we want to help you do that. Text toolkit to 67742. All right, don't go away. We're back with more Washington Watch. right after this.
Everything we do begins as an idea. Before there can be acts of courage, there must be the belief that some things are worth sacrificing for. Before there can be marriage, there is the idea that man should not be alone. Before there was freedom, there was the idea that individuals are created equal. It's true that all ideas have consequences, but we're less aware that all consequences are the fruit of ideas. Before there was murder, there was hate. Before there was a Holocaust, there was the belief by some people that other people are undesirable. Our beliefs determine our behavior, and our beliefs about life's biggest questions determine our worldview. Where did I come from? Who decides what is right and wrong? What happens when I die? Our answers to these questions explain why people see the world so differently. Debates about abortion are really disagreements about where life gets its value. Debates over sexuality and gender and marriage are really disagreements about whether the rules are made by us or for us. What we think of as political debates are often much more than that. They're disagreements about the purpose of our lives and the source of truth. As Christians, our goal must be to think biblically about everything. Our goal is to help you see beyond red and blue, left and right, to see the battle of ideas at the root of it all. Our goal is to equip Christians with a biblical worldview and help them advance and defend the faith in their families, communities, and the public square. Cultural renewal doesn't begin with campaigns and elections. It begins with individuals turning from lies to truth. But that won't happen if people can't recognize a lie and don't believe truth exists. We want to help you see the spiritual war behind the political war, the truth claims behind the press release, and the forest from the trees.
Welcome back to Washington Watch. All right, this is election season, and voters in 10 states will have an opportunity to vote on ballot measures. Quite frankly, that would open the door to expanding the killing of unborn babies as late as the third trimester. It's so important that you vote against these measures. Now, some of the measures do even more than that. The 10 states, by the way, are Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New York, and South Dakota. And we've been covering many of these, going into detail. And by the way, we have a Life on the Ballot resource so that you can be informed and your friends can be informed in this fight for life. Now, you can find that at frc.org/life on the ballot, or simply text LIFE to 67742. That's LIFE to 67742. And it's interesting, I was looking at some of the polling data out of Arizona, and it was interesting that more men than women plan to support this abortion measure. Now, we'd say, well, maybe that's surprising. Maybe not. You recall we talked about this a number of weeks ago. There was a special online event, I think it was called White Guys for Harris, or White Dudes for Harris. And the Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, had this to say.
Of course, men are also more free in a country where we have a president who stands up for things like access to abortion care. Men are more free when the leader of the free world and the leader of this country supports access to birth control and to IVF.
Free to be what? Irresponsible? Well, today, as I said, we're going to take a look at Arizona in greater depth. It's Proposition 139. Joining me now to discuss this is Kathy Herod, president of the Center for Arizona Policy. Kathy, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks, Tony. Glad to be on with you.
All right, so tell us about Prop 139 and what it would do.
Well, Prop 139 would give every individual, it says every individual, a fundamental right to an abortion in our state constitution. And it further says that government cannot deny, restrict, or interfere with that right. So basically, it would wipe out any laws that provide for women's health and safety, that allow parental consent, that require that a doctor oversees the health care of the woman, or even give her information about whether or not to have the abortion. So it's a very radical amendment in our state constitution. It would not be changeable by the legislature in any way, and it basically would be unrestricted, unregulated abortion in Arizona.
I mean, just as I pointed out a moment ago on the polling data where it shows more men are supportive about this, and that's in keeping with what we're seeing elsewhere, would this not lead to the exploitation of women?
Well, very much so. And one of the worst features or most troubling features of the language is that government could not punish anyone who aids or assists the pregnant individual in getting the abortion. And it says pregnant individual. So that's the sex abuser. That's the human trafficker who's going to coerce the woman into having an abortion. So it totally lets men off the hook, and or even further than that. And then when you think that we know why do most women seek an abortion, it's because they don't have the support system. They don't have, the father of the child is not there to help. So it's really outrageous when you stop and think about it.
This, as you pointed out, shuts out moms and dads when their minor daughter needs them most. I mean, this drives a wedge between parent and child, more of what we see on the left. But this is also out of step with the voters in Arizona, is it not?
Yes, and in Arizona, it gets overlooked that our current law is that abortion is legal up until 15 weeks. And after 15 weeks, gestational age of the unborn child, the woman can still get the abortion for a medical emergency, and medical emergency is defined very broadly in our law. So while that may not be where we'd like the law to be, that is where the law is, and that's where we are at in Arizona. And so the choice of the voters is you vote no, and you keep a limit of abortions at 15 weeks. You vote yes, and you bring in unrestricted, unregulated abortion that doesn't provide for women or girls and really makes us just like California with our abortion law.
So, Kathy Herod, 90% of Arizona voters support limits on abortion at 15 weeks or earlier. So why do you think this, as I made reference to a New York Times poll, showed support for Prop 139 at 58% of likely voters? What's going on?
Well, polls can be all over the place. We've seen polls. We've seen another New York Times poll that had it at 53%. We've had one at 52%, 51%. So, to me, what's going on is that once voters understand and see what's in Prop 139, they vote no. The main problem are the lies that the other side's putting out.
No, they're not lying. They're not being dishonest. I mean, people who would advocate for killing unborn children won't tell a lie, would they?
Well, and that it's so frustrating because besides, they've got the media totally on their side in Arizona, but that's why the grassroots effort in Arizona has been absolutely incredible with letting people know the truth about 139 and that it is a no vote.
All right, so we've got about 45 seconds left. What is your encouragement to our viewers and listeners in Arizona?
Well, that we have over 800 pastors that have signed a pro-life declaration, that I get reports every weekend of pastors who are speaking out strongly against Prop 139. The Catholic bishops have spoken out strongly against 139. So for these next 2 weeks, pray, first of all, but also talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends. ItGoesTooFar.com is the website. The talking points are on there. Spread the word that it's a no vote and that we can defeat this thing. By God's grace and mercy, 139 can go down in Arizona.
ItGoesTooFar.com. That's where people can find the resources about the Arizona ballot initiative. Kathy Herod, always great to see you. Thank you for the great work you're doing there in Arizona.
Thanks a lot.
All right, after the break, I'll be joined by Jewish news syndicate Carolyn Glick to talk about some of the latest news in Israel. The relationship between the U.S. and Israel could be in jeopardy, given what is happening in the Biden administration leaking documents. We talk about that more with Carolyn Glick after the break.
Jesus said in John 15, "These things I've spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full." In 2024, in these divided and uncertain times, how can this be possible? By abiding in Him through His Word. At Family Research Council, we want to help you do that, which is the reason for the Stand on the Word Bible reading plan. In just 10 to 15 minutes each day, you will have read the entire Bible in just 2 years. But more importantly, you will be abiding in Him daily. Find our Bible reading plan at frc.org/Bible. And join Tony Perkins each weekday for a 10-minute devotional inspired by the daily reading and designed to encourage you on this journey through the Bible. Listen on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and YouTube. And remember, the grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever.
The world is hurting. Streets are filled with crime. Families are broken. Sin is celebrated, and God is mocked. Everywhere we look, the wages of our sin are on full display. As Christians, we know that surrender to God's will is the solution to our biggest problems, but not everyone agrees. Even in church, we hear people say the most important thing is to be tolerant, that we shouldn't impose our morality on other people, and that loving our neighbor means celebrating what they do. But you can't do that. It's not that you don't love your neighbor, you do, but you care about God's opinion more than your neighbor's opinion, and this makes you different. In fact, sometimes it makes you feel alone, like you're the only one. But there is good news. You are not alone, not even close. Research has found that there are 59 million American adults who are a lot like you. There are millions of people around the country who are born again, deeply committed to practicing their faith, and believe the Bible is the reliable Word of God. But that's not all. They're also engaged in our government. They're voters. They're more likely to be involved in their community, and they're making a difference in elections. The problem is that a lot of them feel alone too. We want to change that. FRC wants to connect these 59 million Americans to speak the truth together, no matter the cost. If you want to learn more about this group and what it means to be a spiritually active, governance-engaged conservative, or if you want to find out if you are one of these SageCons yourself, go to frc.org/SageCon and take the quiz to find out. The world is hurting, and we have the solution. We can't do it alone, but we can do it if we work together. That's what we're working toward every day. Join us. Go to frc.org/SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more. That's SAGECON, SageCon, to learn more.
This is Washington Watch. I'm Tony Perkins, your host. Thanks for joining us. The website, tonyperkins.com. All right, again, I want to make you aware of the resources we have for those of you in those 10 states that have life measures on the ballot, or anti-life measures, more accurately. You can text the word life to 67742. It's a great document. Just kind of runs down what it is, what's on the ballot, so you'll know all the facts, and you can share that with your friends. So text life to 67742. Our word for today comes from 1 Kings chapter 12, where Jeroboam, fearing that the people of the northern kingdom might return to Judah by worshiping at the temple of Jerusalem, makes a troubling decision. He creates golden calves. Verse 28, therefore the king asked advice, made 2 calves of gold, and said to the people, it is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, which brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Now this thing became a sin, for the people went to worship before the one as far as Dan. So Jeroboam prioritized political power over the people's spiritual well-being. This story highlights the danger of manipulating faith for political control. As Bible-believing Christians, we affirm the separation of church and state as a safeguard against such misuse. Both institutions, though, are distinct, but under the authority of God. However, today some use separation to imply that God has no role in government or public life. This, my friends, is a distortion we absolutely cannot and must not accept. To find out more about our journey through the Bible, text Bible to 67742. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is expected to arrive in Israel on Tuesday during a multi-country diplomatic mission across the Middle East. President Biden and other U.S. officials believe that the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, the mastermind behind the October 7th terrorist attack, could open up new avenues for diplomacy. However, the U.S.'s role in ending the conflict may be in question following the leak of a top-secret military document detailing Israeli preparations for a potential retaliatory strike against Iran. And then also over the weekend, there was an attempted drone strike on the residence of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And by the way, this is what he had to say in response.
Well, 2 days ago, we took out Yahya Sinwar, the terrorist mastermind whose goons beheaded our men, raped our women, burnt babies alive. We took him out, and we're continuing our battle with Iran's other terrorist proxies. We're going to win this war.
So will something deter you?
No.
He was asked if that drone strike would deter him. You heard his answer. Join me now from Israel to provide insight is Carolyn Glick, senior contributing editor at the Jewish News Syndicate and host of the Carolyn Glick Show on JNS. Carolyn, thank you for taking time out of the holiday to join us. Happy Sukkot.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to join you as always.
So just today, Israel intercepted 5 drones in the area of the Mediterranean Sea before they crossed into Israeli territory. Things are not calming down. They seem to be heating up.
Oh, yes, very much so. Yesterday, Israel hit 30 targets that were all financial and economic centers for Hezbollah. They have a bank, because why wouldn't you have a terrorist organization that swallows a country that doesn't take over the financial system through its own bank? And so Israel destroyed 30 out of, I think, 50 branches of this bank last night. And it's continuing to operate both on the ground and in the air and from sea to push Hezbollah back. Amos Hochstein, the administration's go-to guy for negotiations with Hezbollah strawmen, is back in Beirut today trying to reach some sort of a diplomatic accord. Israel has given him new conditions for reaching some sort of a negotiated ceasefire to the deal that include freedom of operation for Israel to block Hezbollah from ever receding along the border with Israel and pushing all Hezbollah forces physically north of the Litani River in some areas like the city of Metula, much further than the Litani River further north, away from Israel.
So, Karen, it looks like the U.S., the Biden administration, I should say, I want to differentiate because I don't think it represents all of America. They're scrambling to try to negotiate a resolution here. But as I said in the open, I would think that the trust for the U.S. is somewhat diminished even further after events this weekend where a U.S. top-secret document kind of detailing Israeli preparations for a retaliatory strike against Iran was leaked.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, I don't think there's much chance of a ceasefire because Iran has taken direct control over Hezbollah, and they're not interested in a ceasefire. They need Hezbollah to keep shooting at Israel. So there's not going to be any sort of an agreement reached. But be that as it may, your question is correct. I think that the United States' stock has gone down pretty significantly in terms of the way that Israel views it, not only because of the intelligence breach, which was stunning, where you had the National Geospatial Institute's information about what they're spying on Israeli air bases and other strategic assets in Israel being leaked to a Telegram page that has links to the Iranian regime. And then, of course, it immediately became public knowledge about the types of aircraft that Israel is using to train for the mission, what sort of bombs or actually air-launched ballistic missiles they claim that Israel is training to launch against Iran. So there's a lot of information there in these leaked documents, top secret documents, that is based on American espionage against Israel.
Well, let me ask you this question. I'm going to put this in the form of a question. Based on the recent events, I mean, Israel has experienced some tremendous breakthroughs in the last few weeks in taking out the leadership of Hamas and Hezbollah. What's the sense there in Israel? I mean, I would think that the momentum is building to go ahead and finish this off, but what's the sense there on the ground?
There's a sense of optimism. There's a sense, a little bit of growing frustration. When are we going to be attacking Iran already? I think you could say that the impatience is growing, but I think that seems to be something that's in the works to happen pretty quickly from the news from today.
So there is support for the Israeli Defense Forces to move out and strike Iran, the head of the snake.
There's an expectation and a demand. I mean, I don't think that there's anybody in Israel, or very few people in Israel, are deluding themselves into thinking that there's some sort of a deal to reach with Iran when they're on the cusp of a nuclear arsenal. So absolutely, there's a sense. I think the main concern that you hear today in Israel is not what Israel has to do, but how the United States is working under the Biden-Harris administration to subvert all of Israel's war aims And it's not just the leaked top secret information about Israel's preparations for the attack in Iran. It's also that the United States last week um, it sent a letter threatening an arms embargo against Israel if we work to secure our war aims, and even if the Knesset passes legislation to outlaw UNRWA, the UN agency that has been shown over the past year to simply be an auxiliary force to Hezbollah, that its members are Hamas members.
You talk about the agency that helped stock Sinwar's bunker with
exactly,
supplies?
And also precisely that one, the same one that he was receiving all the supplies from, that the United States has been demanding, the Biden administration has been demanding that Israel allow more and more and more of this UNRWA aid controlled by Hamas into Hamas regime areas of Gaza to supply Hamas. And the United States has been saying that if Israel takes any action against UNRWA, which has been exposed as a terrorist organization over the past year, its members have held Israeli hostages. They killed Israelis. They took them hostage on October 7th. They've been massively exposed as, Hamas headquarters are in UNRWA's headquarters. So they're just overlapping organizations. And the United States said that they were going to place an arms embargo against Israel if Israel outlaws UNRWA's operations in its territory. So this is really shocking. So the United States is openly now under Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Secretary of State Tony Blinken, who's coming to Israel and meeting with the Prime Minister tomorrow, they're threatening an arms embargo against Israel if we continue to act to secure our war goals, whether that's in Lebanon or in Gaza or in Iran. And so I think the main thing that's troubling Israelis is the open hostility that the Biden administration and that Kamala Harris specifically are exhibiting really on a daily basis, both through formal action and through statements on behalf of Israel's enemies and against Israel.
God have mercy on the United States, given what this administration has been doing as it pertains to Israel. We're in an election. We're 2 weeks out from an election. I would have to think, Carolyn, that factors into a retaliatory strike against Iran. Can we anticipate seeing something soon?
Yes, I mean, I think it's already been reported that Israel intends to attack Iran before November 5th because, the fear here, or really the expectation here, if you want to know the truth of the matter, is that once the Biden-Harris team is no longer burdened by the need to pay lip service to being supportive of Israel, that they're just going to use the 2.5 months between the election and the inauguration of the next president, whomever it is, to massively escalate their actions, their hostile actions against Israel, whether that's with weapons embargoes or UN Security Council resolutions condemning Israel and other actions that they can take. The International Criminal Court, their 3-judge panel is meeting this week to determine whether or not to issue arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant. So all of these things are happening with a nod, nod, wink, wink at a minimum by the Biden-Harris administration. And so Israel understands that even though the United States is actively intruding and trying to undermine our operations in all theaters today, that whatever pressure is being brought to bear against Israel today is going to just get exponentially raised beginning on November 6th.
Carolyn, how extensive do you think the retaliatory strike against Iran will be?
Well, I think I don't know what form it's going to take. I mean, there are a lot of ways to look at Iran, whether it's through airstrikes or other actions on the ground, or remote actions. I mean, there are a lot of different ways to skin a cat, and there are a lot of different ways to attack Iran. It's a very, very difficult target because it's not a little kitty cat. And so, we're going to have to see. But the announced intention of Israel is to carry out an extensive assault against Iran in retaliation, not only for attacking Israel with 200 ballistic missiles on October 1st, but also for the most recent drone attack that hit Prime Minister Netanyahu's private residence.
Do you think this attack will be designed to diminish their capabilities or simply just to respond?
It's not just going to be a response, because, I mean, I think Prime Minister Netanyahu said recently, and I think he reiterated in a statement where he was quoting his late father, the historian Benzion Netanyahu, earlier today, that what Israel is thinking about now is overthrowing the regime. So I don't think that this is going to be a strike, just a demonstration of capabilities. I think that Israel's goal here, in terms of how do we get the most bang for our buck, or whatever, is that the targets that are going to be hit, whatever they are going to be significant to the regime, significant from Iran's strategic perspective in the region, and that their purpose, among others, is going to be to destabilize and weaken the regime's grip on power in Iran.
That would be in keeping with the comments he made a couple, 2 or 3 weeks ago, directly to the Iranian people, saying, our beef is not you. We look forward to a day when the people of Iran and Israel live together in peace.
Yes, and that sentiment is shared by millions and millions of Iranians, and it is true. It's harder for Israel to make a separation between the Palestinians and the regime, since they democratically elected Hamas, and because the Palestinian Authority, which is supposed to be moderate, is actually just exactly like Hamas and everything related to Israel and its desire to annihilate Israel. The same is true in Lebanon, where you don't really see a distinction between the Lebanese regime and Hezbollah, because Hezbollah just swallowed Lebanon whole and controls all aspects of life there. But there's a difference with Iran, because the people of Iran have been in near continuous revolt against the regime that so harshly oppresses them for well over a decade and a half. And they've made very clear in every way possible, including with their, by giving their lives for the sake of their to try to bring down this regime, that they really share Israel's interest in overthrowing the regime. So I think that Israel has a partner in the Iranian people. I think the Israeli people see that, and I think the Iranian people desire a rebuilding of ties that existed and that were very strong between Iran and Israel before the 1979 Islamic Revolution.
I think that's true. We see that on many fronts. Carolyn Glick, always great to see you. Thanks for joining us. I know it's late there in Israel. Thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And folks, I want to encourage you to sign our petition to the presidential candidates to support Israel, both. Just text the word support to 67742. That's support to 67742, and sign that petition that we'll deliver to both campaigns. And be praying. We need to pray. We need to vote. We need to stand. And one of the stands we need to take is with Israel. History and Scripture both tells us, instructs us, that those who oppose and come against Israel, doesn't work out well for them. Scripture says, blessed are those who bless you. And we want to be on the side of the blessing, not the curse. And we need leaders who will stand with Israel. And pray. Pray for Israeli leaders to make the right decisions. Pray for our leaders to make the right decisions as well. All right, folks, out of time for today. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, when you've prayed, when you've prepared, and when you've taken your stand, by all means, keep standing.
Washington Watch with Tony Perkins is brought to you by Family Research Council and is entirely listener-supported. Portions of the show discussing candidates are brought to you by Family Research Council Action. For more information on anything you heard today, or to find out how you can partner with us in our ongoing efforts to promote faith, family, and freedom, visit TonyPerkins.com.